Well, police in France say two people wanted in connection with a jihadist cell, a cell believed to be planning an attack in Belgium, have been arrested. Police say the suspects were stopped in France as they were trying to get their way to Italy. These arrests come as security forces in several European countries rounded up suspected fighters. Police in Belgium, France, and also Germany say at least a dozen people with suspected ties to the ISIS terror group have been detained. These arrests come a day after this. Special forces storming an apartment in the eastern Belgian city of Verviers and foiling an alleged terror plot there. Two suspects were killed, a third arrested. European intelligence services are saying that up to 20 jihadist sleeper cells could be planning attacks in France, Germany, Belgium, and the Netherlands. Oren Kessler is my guest. He is with the Foundation for the Defense of Democracies. It's a nonpartisan policy institute based in the U.S. Capitol. And Oren, I want to ask you this. We're talking about these 20 terrorist sleeper cells. And when we hear this term, sleeper cell, I want to know what you think that actually means in terms of how much of a threat they are, how operational they may be.
Well, I think one major sort of factor that has been on the radar of intelligence services across Europe is, for example, the issue of returnees from Syria and Iraq. I think that really underscores the level of threat that Europeans are now facing. And in Britain, for example, there are most likely about 1,000 fighters in Syria and Iraq right now with organizations like ISIS and other extremist groups. A similar figure for France. Even a country like Belgium, which only has a population of about 10, 11 million, has sent about 450 fighters to these organizations. And these fighters, many of them, come back. And either they have come back or they will come back. And most likely, at least some of them, will commit attacks in their respective countries.
A question for you now about geography. I'm curious about the borders in Europe. Because so many of these countries now are part of the European Union, that has, to a certain extent anyway, erased a lot of the borders between them. And you'll hear about so-called jihadists now, France saying they're trying to flee to Italy, or they may have escaped to Germany, they may have crossed over into the Netherlands or got to the UK. What kind of challenge does that pose for law enforcement, for intelligence in Europe?
I think it poses a tremendous threat. It's sort of a pillar of the EU, and particularly the Schengen zone, that European citizens can travel between countries unimpeded. And to now start a new regime, a new set of rules in which national borders will once again become barriers to travel, I think is a major. It's not something the EU wanted to do, but I think it's something certainly. Far-right parties in various states of Europe are talking about this. They have been for several years. And I think it's something that will become a more sort of mainstream prospect the more Europeans think about these attacks and think about the threats that they face.
And the intelligence gathering, it strikes me, the intelligence sharing and even the tracking, Oren, has got to become a lot more sophisticated, because you can have a situation where, for example, the men who were killed in Belgium earlier this week, they had been tied to ISIS in Syria. They traveled there at one point. They were allowed back into Europe. First of all, how do you stop that from happening? And we know some of them will travel to third countries, Turkey and elsewhere, in order to sort of perhaps cover where they had been.
Indeed, Turkey is perhaps the leading sort of third-party state for jihadis and potential jihadis to travel through. And it's something I think Turkey should be called to account over far more than it is. Now, in terms of intelligence, I think Belgium took some really important concrete steps today. The Belgians announced a 12-point plan, a counter-terror plan that also involves, among other things, making it a crime to travel abroad to join extremist groups and having your identification cards taken away if you're suspected of having done so.
Oren Kessler in Washington. Good to have you on the program today, Oren. Thank you for this.